Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of MSP School or MSPBusinessSchool.com. I appreciate you joining us here today. As you can hear once again, Rob Rogers is all by him lonesome. Tim McNeil is out, Brian Doyle's out. They're all out, and I'm holding down the ship. I've got to do the intros, I got to do the middle, I got to do it all by myself here today. So we're in for a treat because I have a very special guest here today. One of my dear friends who I've known for a long time, one of my friendly competitors from back in the day. Carrie Richardson, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on MSP Business School again, Rob.
Yeah.
I've been a guest a few times. You've been on my podcast. I've been on your podcast.
It's a sign of how much we like you. So,
honestly,
and how well you do.
There is enough business in the channel for everyone, and I don't think either of us ever saw the reason to be shitty to each other. Am I allowed to say shitty?
No, you're not.
Bleep. Bleep.
But for everybody who doesn't know about the friendship that we have had, Carrie, jump in, tell everybody about how we met, how we competed, how we smoked you every step of the way.
I don't know. One of us is still running their business and the other one isn't. So I know one of us got smart and the other one is still no, we're all Rob and I have known each other for probably since 2013 now.
Yeah.
So I started Managed Sales Pros as a will cold call for anybody who could afford paying our bill kind of company back in the day. We weren't managed services specific. The company was called Cold Calls. And I actually had a conversation with my very first client the other day. So here we are 10 years later, and he calls and he's like, "Hey, I just moved to another software company. Are you still doing that cold calling thing?" And I was like, "No, I am not."
Hey, but weren't you in an incubator back at the very start?
Yeah, at the very start, we were in the Eureka Project. So before we became Cold Calls, we were in the Eureka Project. I used to cold call everybody from the local newspaper that had like a help wanted ad for sales reps. This is like internet was here, but people were still reading the paper if they needed a job back then. So I would just go through it. I'm like, "Hey, do you need someone to make your cold calls? Hey, do you need someone to make your cold calls?" Hey. And finally somebody said yes. And then they're like, "How much is it?" And I was like, $30 an hour. And they're like, "Yeah, that sounds great." Didn't charge enough. But we took care of that later.
Yeah, for sure.
So that person introduced me to an MSP. And they said like, "Hey, can you call for a managed IT company?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course we can." It's like, managed IT, what is that? And that's how we ended up coming into the managed IT space. We worked with an HTG peer group business. That company introduced us to their peers. And, that one peer group pretty much started our business. I went from having 2 clients paying like $30 an hour to having $1 million call center in less than 2 years. So people really hate cold calling. They just don't want to do it. The managed service providers didn't want to do it at all, as you and I both know very well.
Yeah.
And Rob and I competed for business. Like, I lost one, he won one. I won one, he lost one. We had a very firm don't be a jerk policy in place.
Right.
So one of my clients called Rob, I would always give OSR the opportunity to go and fix that problem before we would take the business. So they did the same for me. So we had
a good relationship.
Relationship. And then we almost partnered a few times, and I always end up being the one that gets cold feet. But not because I don't love you guys. It's just because I can't imagine having to cooperate with people.
Right.
People might describe me as difficult, Rob.
No, nobody would say that. No. To your face. You're tough. Nobody would say that to you. But
Ian might say it.
The reason I bring that up, Carrie, is about the incubator, is because this idea that you've come up with now is kind of like you giving back in an incubator type of way, right? Teaching people how to build up their sales and marketing department and getting all your friends and influencers and the ecosystem together to help MSPs do this. So before we get in there, tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now with Croocial.
So Croocial is a company that starts conversations. Mm-hmm. The challenge that we found, and I'm sure that you guys found it as well, now that you've pivoted out of the lead generation space into the software development space, but When we started the business in 2013, maybe one in every like 90 to 100 people would say yes to a sales appointment with an IT company.
Mhm.
By 2022, when I sold Managed Sales Pros, we were like at 1 in 300.
Yeah.
And it was just getting harder. Now, that's not to say it isn't impossible. And that 1 in 300 is still a fantastic lead.
Yep.
But it takes so long to get them that from like an outsourced perspective, if somebody's going to pay a company to do their marketing for them or their lead generation for them, you have to go into the conversation honestly saying like, here's what we can achieve. And 300 calls with a part-time agent, now that's a couple of meetings a month. So for a company that never did the math on how much is cost of acquisition, right?
Yeah.
Like how much does it cost us not just to like get a lead in the door, but by the time it's all said and done, how much did it cost us to win this business? And I think that more mature companies that have done that math understand that outsourced cold calling is still a good investment. But they've also gotten to the point then that they're likely looking at building in-house. So you've got a little bit of a sweet spot of over 2 million in revenue and under 5. And that's where cold calling is going to be the most effective from an outsourced perspective,
Mhm.
because you can afford to ride out the amount of time it's going to take you before you get that first win from cold calling. Croocial started during 2020. Like in 2020, when we couldn't staff effectively and I was trying to figure out like, what are we going to do with our call center? We couldn't pivot to remote and I didn't want to run a remote business again. I sold my US call center in 2020. And then I outsourced to the vendor that eventually bought Managed Sales Pros. And I started playing with things, right? I was like, well, don't know how this is going to go and nobody's in their office anymore. And who knows what telemarketing is going to be like. Like it took people so long just to pivot their phone systems.
Yeah.
Right? We were getting nothing, nobody. Like I think we lost $1 million in annual recurring revenue in 90 days during the pandemic. It's like, whoop. Yeah, like, but we also went to our client base and said, hey, if you want out of your contract, now's the time, because I'm not going to come into the office and fire one person a day
Yeah.
for the next, who knows how long.
Yeah.
So one-time offer, leave your contract today. Everybody left except for one MSP.
Wow.
But we had so many vendors backfilling those spaces because now they didn't have shows to go to and they didn't have, they didn't have the numbers they were going to need to make their number. So it wasn't a total crisis, but it still wasn't the best, quarter of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started thinking like, how are we going to get people to, what are we going to do? And so Tracy and I started playing with things and I was like, okay, we started this thing called Hallway Conference. And Hallway Conference was going to be kind of like an exchange event, but it would be remote and a vendor would host a group of like 12 MSPs. And on a pay for performance basis, that vendor would pay us to secure those 12 MSPs to come into this conference. And we were trying to recreate the vibe of a conference where you like, you grab someone in the hallway and like, hey, how are you solving this problem? Hey, how are you solving that problem? So that was my first kind of like, how do we do an online something that gets people engaged? Nobody would buy it. So that didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
But that's when I started podcasting. So I started a podcast called Hallway Conference.
When did you start that?
In 2020.
In 2020? Okay. That's when we started our podcast.
Yeah. And then I abandoned it because it was an hour-long podcast. So I was like, no, I can't do this because the hour podcast, and we weren't editing, we weren't anything. We were just like doing this for an hour, then publishing it, right? Like, so there was no real structure. But I learned how to edit. I learned how to, use the different tools for podcasting. And we started, like Ian and I started our consulting business. Ian sold his MSP. We started Richardson and Richardson. We started doing more consulting work. We were doing a lot of stuff that was, we do a lot of M&A work, for example, like connecting buyers and sellers. We do a lot of strategic planning, and I was doing sales training and marketing support for MSPs through R&R.
Okay.
Ian did not want to go back into marketing execution, and I didn't want to go into full-time consulting. I like consulting, but I don't like it enough to do it all the time every day. Like if the money is there and it's a short project, I'm into it, but I don't want to spend a year fixing something for someone. If I'm going to spend a year focused on a business, it's going to be my business.
Got it.
Right. So I went back into marketing. Ian went into strategic planning, and Croocial came from that kind of parting of ways. But we started a podcast for Richardson and Richardson. And I realized that it only took 2 or 3 phone calls to get someone to agree to be out on a podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, this is going to change the game. I only have to make 3 or 4 phone calls to get somebody to talk to me for a full hour and then record a podcast with me at a later date. I can't get somebody to take a sales call with me where they'll sit on the phone with me and tell me about their business for an hour. But if I make 3 phone calls or send a couple of LinkedIn notes to somebody, they will be on a podcast. And that's where Croocial came from. I was like, wait, we could talk to anybody we want. We just have to do it differently. We have to think about it differently. People like businesses that wouldn't have given me the time of day ordinarily were like, oh yeah, we'll be on your podcast. Sure.
Yeah.
Nobody ever asks how many people listen to your podcast. Nobody ever asks what's your podcast about. They're just like, yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's
So
such
like,
a brilliant
okay.
idea. It's such a
Yeah.
brilliant idea to come up with that. I just love it. And I'll tell you, we have the same success. 2 to 3 phone calls and somebody says yes. It's we didn't consider it as a business like you did. Like that's just next level thinking. But we did it because we were having a lot of fun. It was COVID and we were like freaking out, not knowing what to do. But now that you put it that way and you put it into the, it's a prospecting tool. It's brilliant. How is it
Well,
working?
people obsess about the audience, right? Like, well, who's going to listen to my podcast? I don't care.
Yeah.
Your mother will listen to your podcast, right? Like, it doesn't matter. That isn't the point. Like, everyone's talking about, well, how do you monetize your podcast? How do you monetize? Like, what do you do? How do you build your community?
Yeah.
Like, you're talking to your community.
Yep.
You're talking to your audience. You have an audience of 1 and they're sitting with you right now and they're telling you about their business. So for strategic planning, it worked fantastic, right? People are talking about how they started their business, how long they've been in business, how many employees do they have? What are the problems that they are facing? What opportunities do they see in the market? What aren't they pursuing and why aren't they pursuing those opportunities? And we call it WIN, which is what's important now. And that's a StratOps structure called the WIN wheel. So we kind of tried to align it with what we were doing. And then if somebody was identifying like, hey, we're lost, right? Like we don't really know what core values are. We don't have a mission and a vision, or like, oh yeah, no, we have core values. Our marketing company wrote them, right? Like that's a huge red flag. And so I could just like, boop, pass that over to Ian and he'd do a 90-minute strategic consult with them and a presentation and a proposal. And if it worked out, it worked out. And at the beginning, it was like maybe 1 in 10 turned into consulting clients. But as we tightened it up, it was like 1 in 4. So I've got this 1 in 4 closing ratio and this 1 in 4 conversion ratio from prospect to conversation. And I was like, we can monetize this.
It's a great idea. I love it. But that's not the only big brain thing that you came up with. This next topic is something that I feel pretty passionate about with you. I really love the go-giver approach to it and what you were able to come up with. And I think it's taken everybody by storm. The MSP Makeover. If you could tell the audience about what the MSP Makeover is, how it's helping the community, and how it's going to help somebody really special. So tell me a little bit about that.
So my kids are obsessed with reality TV. They love the makeover shows, and we watched one called Glow Up, and we watched do they still call it Queer Eye? Is it called something else now? But
I don't know.
Like during the summer, my kid and I watched reality TV. I want to say every night we watched some different reality TV show, which I was never interested in, but now I'm hooked, right? Like I like, oh, what's going to happen? Who's going to win? So I started thinking about this idea and I was like, how can we really like get people engaged in like something where they're giving back to the community? Like the vendor, like we've worked with so many vendors and so many MSPs already, and so have you. So it wasn't very difficult to call people that we already knew and say, hey, like I want to do this thing and I want to make it so attractive for people that everyone will enter, like not just the small MSPs and like not just the people who are struggling in their business, but I want to make it so attractive that everybody will want it. What can I do? And then I started asking people like, hey, would you do this? I'm going to give away a full year of a managed marketing engagement with Croocial. And that is a 6-figure price tag. And Managed Sales Pros is giving away, first I went to the people I knew. So Managed Sales Pros is giving away a full year of cold calling outbound for an MSP. And you're giving away a full year of access to the sales maturity platform and consulting.
Yep.
And some of our other marketing competitors are participating. And it wasn't like, I was like, everybody who wants to do this can do this. So if you go to the mspmakeover.com, you can see a list of people that is growing every day. So I had 50 people. First, it was just the MSP Makeover. Now it's the $1 million MSP Makeover, because there's more than $1 million worth of stuff available there. Just in marketing alone, we've got $500,000 worth of time and systems and strategies and websites and managed marketing and fractional sales coaching and fractional sales execution. Like, everything's in there. And then we got an RMM consultant, the PSA consultant. We have free BDR licensing. We have a free RMM licensing, unlimited licensing. So nobody watered down their offer. Yeah. Right? It's like, if you win, you get it all. Anything you want, everything that you can use. But there's no catches, but there are some qualifiers.
Okay.
Right? So one, if you're already partnered with that company, you can't choose them as part of the MSP Makeover prize. So if you're already an OSR client or already a Croocial client, you don't get it for free. You have to dance with the ones that brung you.
Yeah. So
and if you fired a vendor in the last year, you also can't choose them again.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But I'm looking at, there are some big names on here, Carrie. Some big names. What is the website's name again?
The MSPmakeover.com.
I'll put that on the tile when we're closing down here and we put this up on the channel. But tell me, like an MSP says, you know what, this sounds like a really good idea. I'm going to look into this. What do they have to do in your system in order to qualify? Or I don't even know how it works, but how does it work?
Okay, so the only MSPs that we've disqualified are PE-owned MSPs, because I felt like the burden of having to give free software licenses to a company that, quite frankly, probably doesn't need them if they've got PE money, wouldn't be really fair. So we have no way of knowing how big the MSP that wins will be. So that was one big factor when people were agreeing to participate.
Okay.
Well, what if somebody really big wins? And I'm like, well, if somebody really big wins, then somebody really big wins.
Yeah.
But my thought process was, people aren't going to change RMMs because they win a contest, right? They're not going to fire a trusted vendor to start with someone new. So odds are, if they start with you, they're going to stay with you after that year is up. Mm-hmm. So it's a really great opportunity for vendors that aren't as well known in the channel to get engaged with the market. So, if you don't have to displace somebody, this is a great opportunity to come in and show what you can do, because we're going to follow the winning MSP around for a year after they choose the people that they're going to partner with. But to enter the contest, it's super easy. They have to record a podcast with me and sign a media release.
Okay. What does that mean? What does that mean? They have to do a podcast with you, explaining their business, or just your typical, tell me
what
how
would
you got
you do
here?
if someone gave you $1 million to grow your business? So the podcast is all about, we talk about, I just did my first one. The first MSP podcast was just recorded. So we talk about, how did you start your business? How have you grown your business? What are your plans for the next 5 years? And how would $1 million change those plans, right? So right now you're going along doing this. If someone dropped $1 million in your lap right now, what would you do differently?
Okay. And how do you win?
So on March 1st, all the MSP podcasts will be taken live. We couldn't figure out a way to make it fair otherwise. So we record them. We put them up in Buzzsprout. So for those of you who have podcasts, you've got limited bandwidth to upload every month. And I was like, well, either I'm going to end up paying thousands and thousands of dollars for Buzzsprout one month, or I can just start recording them and keep them private. So we record them, we set them to private. March 1st, every MSP podcast drops on the exact same day, at the exact same time.
Okay.
And then they have 30 days to share their podcast online with their clients, with their peers, with their friends, with their families. The person with the most downloads wins.
Oh, okay. All right.
And in the case of a tie, whoever recorded and scheduled their podcast first is the winner. So it's going to benefit you to get that podcast recorded right now. Don't wait, because, if you've got 100 downloads and the next person has 100 downloads, if you recorded first, you're the winner.
Wow, I really like this. So I got a question for you. Are you going to how do you prep the MSP? I got two questions. How do you
Mhm.
prep the MSP to when they're speaking with you to, before the episode, do you give them like a list and say these are the things we're going to be chatting about? Like how MSP, we're talking about IT people here,
Yep.
and they're very
We do an
process.
hour-long call before we record. So they schedule a call and then we record.
Okay,
So,
so they have a list, they know what they're walking into, they've prepped a little bit, they're good.
yeah. So, for example, today I prepped with an MSP who gave me a phenomenal suggestion for figuring out culture fit between clients and MSPs, right? Before they will go and work with someone, they do something really cool. And I don't want to ruin their
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
by spilling the beans, but I had never thought about that before. And they get like, they're freely sharing, like, here are the things that we do to make sure that our business, and this is like a $5 million MSP freely sharing of the books they're reading, the things that they did, the like E-Myth is their favorite book. E-Myth
Okay.
and Go Giver were their two big reading suggestions. Right. So the MSPs are sharing information, the vendors are sharing information, and the MSP Makeover site is built so that it can pull in through an RSS feed any YouTube channel or any podcast. And I've been pulling in the podcasts that are relevant to our industry. So it's like a one-stop shop now for MSP education. You can listen to MSP Business School right at the MSP Makeover. And it doesn't stop any, like, all of your show notes come into your podcast. All of your guests had little feature pages right there. So they get more backlinks. That helps with organic SEO and domain authority. So anybody that's appearing on an MSP podcast now gets a little bit of an extra PR bump just because we've imported their podcast into that platform.
Yeah, I love this, Carrie. I love it. And I also like that you don't get it for free, right? You have to put in the work. If you're an MSP, you've got to put in the hour with you, then you got to do the podcast, and then you've got to promote it, right?
Yeah.
If you want to win, you're going to have to do some work. If you're trying to be the guy who's going to get, or the girl who's going to get all of this stuff for you, you've got to be putting in work. I
You
like it a
remember
lot.
that terrible tattoo contest I was in years ago? I don't know if you remember that, but so one of my bucket list items was I wanted to be on the cover of a tattoo magazine.
Okay.
And they had this contest through Ink magazine, INK, not INC, although I'd
Yeah.
also like to be on the cover of that
Right,
magazine.
yeah.
Probably more. They had this contest where you enter the contest and then you encourage people to vote for you, and they had heats, right? So I was in, I don't know, wherever, like the Las Vegas, California thing, and whoever got the most votes would progress into the next round. And you could do organic votes or you could buy votes, but you really, like, I was bugging everybody in my network every day, and it was like a full-time job. Go vote for me, go vote for me, go vote for me. And I think people got a little sick of it, but I made it to the final 12. I didn't
Uh-huh.
make it. I couldn't compete with Tara Patrick, who was the person who won the tattoo contest at that
Uh-huh.
time. But I did get invited to the final wrap party. I got to meet all these famous photographers and famous models.
Wow.
And it was a great experience. And I'm just like a normal person who has tattoos, who wanted to do this thing. And it all went to charity. And I think we raised over $5,000. Like, I personally raised over $5,000 just bullying people into voting for me. And so
It
that's
takes
kind
work.
of like, yeah. So that was kind of like all right, I could probably do that. And then I was like pitching the idea to vendors in the space. And I remember I photoshopped like people's heads onto that Netflix poster for that TV show. And I was sending it to people. I'm like, we're going to do this. Do you want to be part of it?
It was
And
good, man.
some vendors were like, but I mean, we got 50, 60 vendors now that are like, yeah, we're going to do this.
Yeah, I love the idea. It's just it's a fantastic way for the go-giver mentality to help the ecosystem, and then having all these MSPs freely give their ideas to help other MSPs. It's just one pane of glass where you have all these MSPs giving ideas in podcasts where you could just go and listen and, like, hear what other people are doing that's being successful and not being successful and how you overcame it.
Yeah.
It's in our podcast, the most success that we have is when MSPs talk about what did not work and how they overcame it. That's what a lot of people want to hear about. But Carrie, I know we're running up to the end of our show here. I really appreciate you doing this and letting us. We're a part of the MSP Makeover as well. and I really appreciate it. Do you have any closing thoughts before we kind of part ways here?
As far as what people should be doing, or how, like, what kind of thoughts do you want, Rob?
Well, the kind of thoughts I'd like is, how can people get involved with this quickly? Just go to the mspmakeover.com. Is that the quickest and easiest way?
Yeah, or you could send me a direct message on LinkedIn and I will just send the intake form over to you. Don't forget to sign your media release. We can't do anything with you unless you sign that media release, right? Like, you have to give us permission to use your likeness in pictures and to quote you in the blog post that we write about the MSP Makeover. So that's a really important piece. You got to sign off on that. And then there's a very very limited entry form that you have to fill out. And the reason we have to do both of those is one of them is attached to the MSP Makeover website, and it automatically creates your guest profile. So you create that, and then I don't have to do like 3 hours of work gathering up your headshot and yelling at you for not sending me your headshot. And the other one goes right into our CRM system, which allows me to get your media release filed with the other stuff. So fill out those 2 forms, please. And then, we've got nothing but podcasts from now until the end of February.
Good for you. Good for you. Carrie, I really appreciate you being on the show here today. We will be including this link that we just talked about on our mspbusinessschool.com podcast and anywhere that you get your episodes out there, to include YouTube. We will have the link on there as well. Carrie, all the best. I really appreciate you jumping on here and telling everybody about this fantastic idea that can really help the community.
Yeah, it's no problem at all. And if you need some podcast guests, I happen to know a lot of MSPs that are going to be recording podcasts for the next little while. So just let me know.
Absolutely. We're always looking for MSP guests. We love talking to the MSPs. It's a fantastic way to, get the community going.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Rob. And thanks for having me on MSP Business School again.
All right. Take care.